Hey guys, tonight, we're heading deep into ancient Rome, beneath the marble statues, beyond the triumphal arches, and straight into the city's busiest, smelliest corner. You're not a senator. You're not a poet. You're not even a baker or soldier. No, tonight, you're the public bathroom attendant. It's early, really early, before sunrise. Rome's just starting to stir, but the noise is already percussive, iron-rimmed wheels clattering over stone roosters, losing their minds 2 streets over, and somewhere nearby a vendor shouting about fish in a tone that could char wood. The scent. Let's call it urban pungent, a blend of yesterday's olives, unwashed tunics, goat dander, and the distant promise of human plumbing. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know what country and time are you listening from right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You roll off your thin straw mattress and immediately regret being awake. But you have a job, a civic duty. One you definitely didn't choose but perform anyway. You are the custodian of one of Rome's bustling public latrines. Imagine a long bench with evenly spaced keyhole openings, a drainage channel beneath, and zero privacy. Add a roof, if you're lucky, a bucket of vinegar water, and about 70 strangers a day. That's your office. You wrap yourself in your work tunic, simple undyed, probably smells like vinegar, and make your way through the narrow alleyways toward the latrine. The streets are still dark, but the outline of the Cloaca Maxima, the massive sewer system of Rome, lurks somewhere beneath your feet. It's a marvel of engineering and a monument to Rome's ambition. It also hums faintly. You like to think it's whispering encouragement. It's not. It's just gas. As you walk, you pass by early risers, a baker hauling wood for his oven, a group of slaves carrying amphorae of wine to the forum, a stray dog licking something it definitely shouldn't. A boy stumbles past, still half asleep, probably headed to sweep marble steps or hold someone's scrolls. You give him a nod. He ignores you. Bathroom attendants don't get nods. You reach the latrine. It's quiet for now. The marble slabs are cold and damp with the memory of yesterday's feet. You open the wooden shuttered windows to let in the faint pink light of morning, and maybe coax in a breeze. A noble lie. You inspect the drainage trench that runs beneath the seats. Still flowing, thank the gods. There's a mild clog near the east end, but you can handle that later with a stick and your dwindling self-worth. You check your supplies, vinegar water check. Sponge sticks cleanish, spare cloths for delicate patrons present. You line everything up like soldiers awaiting orders. You even fluff the sponge tips slightly because presentation matters, at least it does in your mind. Historians still argue whether attendants took pride in their latrines or simply disassociated as a survival mechanism. You're betting on both. By now, a thin stream of early users begins to arrive, older men with stiff knees, young merchants with tight schedules, and the occasional woman sent by a household without indoor plumbing. They settle onto the benches with varying degrees of grace. Some groan. Some chat. One begins humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like yesterday's gladiator chant. You stand near the entrance greeting familiar faces with the half-smile of public service. Some nod, some ignore you. One asks if the vinegar was changed overnight. You lie. The first emergency of the day arrives in the form of a dropped ring. A merchant leans too far over the seat and plop. Silence. He turns to you with a look of betrayal and expectation. You hand him a wooden scoop. He sighs and plunges in. You look away as if granting him dignity. You're not. You're trying not to gag. A few minutes later, a boy runs in, clutching his tunic, clearly in distress. You guide him to the far seat, always the cleanest, and hand him a sponge stick with solemnity. He thanks you with a wheeze. You feel like a priest. And so it begins. The sun hasn't fully risen, but your morning shift is already in full swing. Somewhere above you, the city celebrates its greatness, its aqueducts, its senators, its theaters. But down here, this is the real Rome, the daily grind, the smell of empire. And as you stand with vinegar bucket in hand, sponge sticks over your shoulder, like a weirdly hygienic quiver, you take a deep breath. Immediately regret it. You settle into your usual stance, one foot slightly raised on a wedge of old stone sponge stick, tucked beneath your elbow, like a makeshift baton of hygiene. The latrine is officially in full swing now. Conversations swirl around you like smoke gossip arguments, philosophical musings about whether figs are better roasted or dried. One man recites a poem about a woman's earlobe. Another insists he saw Emperor Domitian himself in disguise buying mushrooms. Spoiler, he did not. As people shuffle in and out, you keep one eye on the drainage. A good flow is your best friend. Rome's public latrines were marvels of engineering, yes, but temperamental marvels. The Cloaca Maxima connects everything like the city's intestines, and when it clogs, let's just say the backup is neither poetic nor survivable. So far, things are moving. Barely. A teenage boy approaches the bench with the exaggerated confidence of someone trying not to look terrified. He peeks down the hole, swallows hard, and glances at you. "Is it deep?" he asks. You nod, like your mother's disappointment. He snorts and sits. You feel oddly triumphant. A woman arrives with 2 children in tow. She scans the seats, wrinkles her nose, and gestures for the cleaner side. You direct her wordlessly. She doesn't say thank you. You're used to that. In Roman society, bathroom attendants exist somewhere between necessary evil and background noise. You're visible only when something goes wrong. Still, you're part of the system. You have a function. Rome runs on order, and that includes the order of its bodily functions. The scribe arrives next, always precisely 2 hours after dawn. He carries a tablet tucked beneath his arm and always takes the second seat from the end farthest from the sun glare. He nods, once sits, and proceeds to write mid-process. It's impressive, possibly disturbing. But he tips well, so you keep his sponge extra clean. And now comes the bread seller who talks to himself as he does his business, loudly. He recites the day's inventory, mutters about rising yeast, and once sang a ballad about millet that stuck in your head for a week. Today it's a rhythmic chant about sesame seeds. "Sesame, sesame, don't betray me," he drones. You hum along involuntarily. A duet. As the latrine fills, you start your circuit, wandering the perimeter, checking sponges, shifting buckets, topping off vinegar, adjusting drapes for modesty, where modesty insists on hiding. There's a kind of rhythm to it all, the shuffle of sandals, the splash of water, the occasional grunt. It's not glamorous, but it's alive. You nod at the water boy, who arrives with a new amphora for the rinse basins. He sets it down with a grunt, wipes his brow, and mutters about the weight of hydration. "Water is heavy," he says. "So is empire," you reply. He doesn't laugh. Water boys never do. Now and then someone complains about the heat. Rome is warm today, and the marble seats are doing their best impersonation of stovetops. One elderly man uses a folded tunic as a cushion, then scoffs that the Senate should pass a law for padded seats. Pillows for the people, he declares. You offer him a folded cloth. He sniffs it suspiciously before accepting. And then comes the tax collector. You know the sound of his sandals, fast-clipped, judgmental. He doesn't speak. He inspects. He peeks at the buckets. He runs a finger along the marble. He sniffs. He once tried to dock your pay for a spot of mildew. You retaliated by swapping his sponge with one dipped in fig juice. A childish move. Worth it. He surveys the latrine, mutters something about sponge rotation schedules, and leaves. You exhale. The tension breaks like a bad clay lid. One of the regulars, an ex-gladiator now working as a gatekeeper, arrives with a bruise on his cheek and a bag of roasted chickpeas. He always offers you a handful. Today, he says, "Watch out. There's a goat loose in the forum." You nod solemnly. Goats are chaos in fur. And here it is, the moment that defines your morning. A distant trumpet sounds. A hush falls. And in steps the priest, clad in spotless linen scented with frankincense, walking like the floor is blessed. He glides to the cleanest seat. You hand him his own personal sponge stick, wrapped in embroidered cloth. He inclines his head in acknowledgement. He doesn't speak. He never does. He sits. The latrine collectively pretends not to notice. This, you realize, is Rome. The layers, the contradictions, sacred men on sacred seats doing sacred things while you humble attendant refill vinegar and wipe down marble. You once saw that priest preach about humility. You also saw him scold a child for stepping on his shadow. Historians still argue whether Roman religion softened the elite or simply perfume-wrapped their pride. As the priest departs, you bow slightly. He nods once, and just like that, the tension evaporates. You make your final vinegar check. The sun is higher now. The latrine hums with conversation, bodily noises, and the occasional slap of sandals. The benches are full. The system holds. You dip your sponge stick in the rinse bucket squeeze and flick off the excess like a maestro tuning an instrument. Not glamorous, but necessary. The crowd thins slightly as the sun creeps higher, shadows shortening like yawns stretched too far. But the latrine, like all public things in Rome, never fully rests. There's always someone with a need, an itch, a story to tell mid-squat. You pace slowly now, giving the illusion of leisure while secretly assessing everything. The rinse basin's full, the water jug halfway down, the amphorae near the entrance, still sealed good, the basket of spare cloths running low. You make a mental note to cut more from the old tunics tucked behind the storage niche. A young couple enters newly married, judging by the way they fumble through the entrance hands, brushing cheeks flushed. They pretend they don't notice each other as they choose benches on opposite ends. You chuckle silently. A week ago, they probably whispered love poems over grapes. Today they share a toilet. That's Rome for you. No barriers too sacred, no space too private. The man tries to break the silence. "I think I saw a rat near the bakery." The woman replies without turning. "That's not a rat. That's the baker's cousin." You admire her composure. A breeze moves through the open colonnade, merciful brief. It carries with it the scent of olive oil, baked bread, and something more pungent, vinegar-soaked sponge sticks and humanity's digestive truth. You've stopped noticing mostly. Your nose has evolved or surrendered. One of the older women gestures for help. You approach and refill her basin. She blesses you softly. She does this every day. Once she told you her husband died on that very bench. "Best seat in the house," she said deadpan. He always did like to go out with a flourish. You ask how she keeps coming back. She shrugs. "Where else am I going to see my friends?" That's the thing. The latrine isn't just a place of bodily business. It's social glue. It's a meeting ground. It's the forum for people who don't want to be yelled at by senators. Historians still argue whether Roman public baths or latrines fostered more gossip, and whether that gossip ever changed the fate of an empire. You wouldn't be surprised. Another regular enters humming to himself. He's the type who tries to tip you in riddles. What walks in but never leaves. You groan. A full belly. He claps. Close enough. This morning's riddle is about something that eats your food, ruins your wine, and leaves you itchy. The answer is mother-in-law, but you guess bedbugs, and he accepts it. By mid-morning, a scroll reader takes up his usual place near the corner. He never uses the facilities. Just sits with a scroll, reading aloud whatever bit of Virgil or gossip tablet he's smuggled in. Today's selection involves a noblewoman and an amphora of questionable origin. You don't catch the whole story, but the punchline lands hard enough to draw laughter from 4 benches and 1 passing mule handler. The mule handler is new. He pauses, stares at the scene, then steps back and mutters, "You people are weirder than Gauls." You nod. It's not untrue. A commotion rises near the far end. Someone forgot to bring a sponge. You move swiftly, handing over a fresh one with just a flick of the wrist. They nod in gratitude, embarrassment, thick as the steam rising from the rinse basin. You offer no judgment. Everyone forgets once, maybe twice. You pause at the main drain opening. You check the flow, glance at the slanted tiles leading downward. You toss a pebble and listen for the splash. Satisfying. No blockage. Yet, you whisper thanks to Cloacina, goddess of sewers. Yes, Rome has a goddess for that. She's probably underappreciated. Like you. Behind you, the young couple finally leave together, hands clasped this time. You can't help but smile. Some stories, however soiled their beginnings, still manage a romantic twist. You settle back on your stool sponge stick, balanced like a scepter across your lap. You are the unofficial monarch of this marbled micro-kingdom, the arbiter of rinse and reason. You who control the flow, command the quiet, and soothe the startled with vinegar and cloth. A man rushes in with wild eyes. He collapses onto a seat, gasping. "Taxes," he says. They found the hidden jars. No one asks what kind of jars. It doesn't matter. The man has the look of someone who will need a second visit within the hour. Another man, drunk or trying to be, recites a toast to Saturn while attempting to sit sideways. He misses entirely and ends up on the floor laughing. You help him up. He tips you with a single dried apricot. "For your troubles," he says. You accept it like it's gold. As the sun inches toward noon, the benches start to empty. People go off to markets, temples, baths. The lull arrives the sacred window when you can finally exhale and clean. You grab a cloth and start wiping down the benches. You scrub the rinse basin, replace the vinegar, collect the spent sponge sticks, and drop them into the vinegar bucket for a long soak. This part is oddly satisfying. Like closing a scroll after a good story. You pause to drink from your own flask water, not beer. You tried drinking on the job once. It didn't go well. A goat got in. A sponge was misassigned. There was yelling. Never again. You sit sipping, watching the sunlight reflect off the polished marble. A butterfly drifts through the open-air entrance, circles lazily, and then flits out. You wonder briefly if it's seen better latrines. Probably not. The afternoon settles like a sluggish cat, hot, slightly irritable, and determined to nap across every surface. The hum of Rome shifts subtly from the clang of early market bells to the slower rhythm of half-empty streets and the long shadows of siesta. For you, there is no nap. You're still here, still on the marble, still the keeper of rinses and regularity. The benches are mostly empty now, save for the occasional older man who shuffles in with the slow dignity of someone who's earned every wrinkle. One such man nods at you as he enters, lays his walking stick beside the bench, and eases down with a sigh like the end of a long scroll. "I remember when this place had brass fittings," he mutters. You smile, knowing full well it never did. But you don't argue. Memory in Rome has a way of gilding the marble. A moment later, the peace is broken, not rudely, just rhythmically, by the arrival of the mop boy. He's 12, smells like vinegar and unwashed ambition, and today he's humming something you recognize from the public baths. It's not a song so much as a patterned 3 tones and a hopeful grunt. "Late, you say?" "Lunch," he counters. You hand him the vinegar bucket and gesture toward the tile rows. He gets to work sloshing a bit too liberally, but you've given up trying to correct him. His heart is in the right place, probably in his stomach. As he mops, you take a moment to inventory the supply alcove. Sponges 22, all trimmed from last week's tunic donation. Vinegar 3 jars, 1/2 full. Cloths low. You'll need to beg scraps from the laundry quarter again, where the washerwomen always demand stories in exchange. Last time you made up a tale about a senator who mistook a bidet jug for wine. It bought you 5 linen squares and a lemon. You peek outside. The heat is thick now, pressing down like a tax collector with a hangover. A few dogs lie in the shade of the columns. A cat eyes them suspiciously from the ledge. Somewhere nearby, someone is trying to sell roasted chestnuts. You make a mental note, worst possible time for roasted anything. Inside, the air is still. You fan yourself with the side of a broken tile, your unofficial tool of office. Your throne, your scepter, your breeze. A young man stumbles in next, clearly struggling. You recognize the posture, clenched jaw, hunched shoulders, a shuffle of desperation. You hand him a sponge without a word. He nods in gratitude and rushes to the bench. A moment later, you hear him breathe out like he's been holding it since sunrise. "Thank the gods," he murmurs. "And you?" You give a little salute. It's nice to be appreciated. That's the thing most people don't realize. Your job isn't just to keep the place clean. It's to make it feel like a refuge, a sanctuary of slight relief in a city that never really sleeps and rarely says thank you. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the job brings insight. Like when 2 philosophers walk in still deep in debate. One insists the gods invented beer to make men more pliable. The other claims beer predates the gods. You don't interrupt. You just refill the rinse basin and pretend not to listen. Beer is bread's exhalation, one says. Beer is the apology bread makes for being dry, the other replies. You want to applaud, but instead you offer them each a sponge and walk away. Let the sages sit on marble and ponder the divine while you tend to more earthly matters. Outside, thunder rumbles faintly in the hills. A lie, probably. Rain rarely honors Rome in the dry season, but it makes people look up, think twice, hurry home. You hope it stays a rumor. The mop boy trips on his own bucket and curses softly in Latin too modern for polite company. You raise an eyebrow. "My foot slipped," he mumbles. "On vinegar, on fate?" Fair enough. You hear someone call from the doorway, a woman asking if this is the latrine with the nice worker who gives clean sponges. You nod and welcome her in. She smiles and offers you a small pouch of olives as thanks. You bow deeply. You will dine like a senator tonight. The pace slows further. The marble begins to warm, less underfoot. A merchant stops and leaves a copper coin on the basin lip and disappears before you can thank him. A child runs through giggles and gets snatched back by a tired mother muttering something about manners and God's punishments. You take a moment to stretch your back. It cracks like old parchment. You feel every year of your 35 summers, which in Roman bathroom years might as well be 100. A pigeon flies in circles and leaves before landing. Even birds know to keep visits short. By now the benches are drying. The vinegar bucket is nearly empty. The sponge pile is low. You count the final clean ones like coins in a stingy purse. 7 left. That'll get you to sundown if no one panics. You sit close your eyes and listen. The hum of distant sandals, the occasional cough, the eternal drip of rinse water, and beneath it all the quiet pulse of Rome itself. Historians still argue whether Roman sanitation was truly advanced or just cleverly disguised. You don't care. You're part of the system now. Part janitor, part priest, part silent observer of the most universal act in human history. And as the mop boy dumps the vinegar bucket and starts sweeping up loose straw, you lean back against the column, watching the dust rise and settle again. Another day halfway done. Another 1,000 visitors who didn't die of dysentery. A small miracle repeated daily. You glance toward the sky and murmur your thanks. To Cloacina, to Vinegar, to your feet, and maybe just maybe to beer. By late afternoon, the edges of Rome feel like a frying pan kissed by a lazy god. The streets shimmer with heat, the stonework glows faintly, and every shadow becomes a shrine. You, however, are too busy dealing with the latest challenge to enjoy any metaphors the vinegar shipment is late. You double-check the alcove. 3 empty jars, one with a crust of dried residue. No vinegar. Could have sworn the delivery was today, you mutter, half to the mop boy, half to Jupiter. The boy shrugs, chewing something he absolutely didn't ask permission to eat. Maybe the donkey got heat stroke, he says, pointing vaguely towards the alley. Maybe you will if you don't fetch water, you retort, handing him a jug. He scampers off. Not quickly, but enough to pass for motivation. Without vinegar, your rinse basins are glorified puddles. You try not to think about what people are rinsing off. Instead, you focus on managing supplies, rationing cloths, sorting sponges by shape and size, scraping the caked-on bits from yesterday's accident on the east bench. You pause. There it is again. That distant chant. Not religious, not political, just rhythmic. Turns out it's the Guild of Potters marching by. They're heading to a demonstration at the Temple of Vulcan. You watch them for a moment, then glance around your own sanctuary of clay amphory bowls, rinse pots, all hand-shaped fired, and now strangely sacred. You've developed a quiet reverence for the materials you once ignored. Clay is life here. It holds beer, it holds water, it holds waste. Without it, you'd be rubbing strangers with your hands. You're still considering how pottery became your philosophy when an unusual customer walks in. She's tall, wrapped in indigo linen hair braided with silver rings. Her sandals are the kind that cost more than your entire sponge stash. She scans the room with narrowed eyes. Is this the public latrine with the dual-chamber rinse system, she asks. You blink. Yes. Also the one with the cleanest sponges. She steps forward. I'm from the Domus Varia. We're considering installing similar facilities. I wanted to observe your protocols. You try not to panic. This is a test. A scouting mission. A potential job upgrade if you play it right. You show her your rinse method. You explain the vinegar soak, the sponge rotation, the 2-basin system, first rinse, second final dip. She asks about hygiene, drainage, airflow. You do your best to sound like a professor of latrine logistics. Fascinating, she says, inspecting a sponge. Do you know how to extract the scent of lavender? You hesitate. Not legally. She laughs. A good sign. She stays for 20 minutes, takes notes on a wax tablet, and finally leaves with a single sponge sample tucked into a perfumed pouch. As she exits, she tosses a coin into your lap. Gold. The mop boy returns right after. Did I miss something? You hold up the coin. You missed your raise. He groans. Back to work. More customers file in travelers, bathers, priests. A man with a limp and a bag of dates. A woman scolding her 3 sons while expertly managing a tunic, a sponge, and a vinegar jug. Each one greeted with your best blend of professionalism and indifference. As the rinse basin finally empties, you hear the knock, 3 quick taps, 1 slow. That's the vinegar merchant's signal. You rush to the door, heart light. He's there with 2 amphorae slung over a mule and an apologetic smile. Got lost, he says. In the forum, you ask. In my thoughts, he replies, unloading the jars. You forgive him. Mostly because of the vinegar. And maybe a little for the poetry. The amphorae are warm, but intact. You help transfer the vinegar into your rinse jars, noting the tangy sharpness that fills the room. It's both cleansing and strangely comforting. The mop boy dips his cloth and sniffs. Smells like security, he says. You don't correct him. Evening creeps in now, shadow by shadow. The marble cools underfoot. A breeze wanders through the arches, nudging the linen curtains like a curious cat. You light the oil lamp at the front, casting golden light over your domain. An older man, half drunk on honey wine, stumbles in, leans on a pillar, and starts singing about the glory of Saturn's bowel movements. You guide him gently to a bench. He blesses you in 3 dead dialects. Another regular arrives. He always brings you a handful of figs and stories from the baths. Today's tale involves a lost sandal, a stolen kiss, and a sponge fight. You listen, laugh, and trade him an extra cloth square for the fig that's least squished. It's quieter now. The golden hour. You take a moment to stand in the middle of the room and admire it. A historian once said Rome's greatness lay in its roads, its laws, its legions. But here, in the echo of your footsteps, in the shimmer of vinegar in the clean stone, and whispered thanks, you think maybe it's in the small systems, the daily dignities, the sponge, the bowl, the gesture. Historians still argue whether the latrine attendants were slaves, servants, or civil workers. You don't mind the ambiguity. You are for today a custodian of calm. The mop boy stops beside you. Tomorrow can I run the rinse line? You look down. He's finally serious. Sure, you say, but no humming. He nods. You crack your neck and watch the lamplight flicker across the stone. For now, the vinegar flows. The benches are clean. The sponges are sorted. Another day nearly done. And you're still standing. The last of the daylight has slipped away now, leaving only the soft orange flicker of oil lamps and the occasional moonbeam threading through the high arches. You've closed the main entrance, turned the sign, etched clay, not wood, to signal the end of public use. But your work isn't finished. Now comes the quiet shift. You head toward the supply alcove tucked into a shaded corner behind the vinegar jugs. The mop boy is curled against a wall chin, to chest snoring softly, with a sponge clutched in one hand like it's a stuffed toy. You let him sleep. He's earned it barely. You light a second lamp and inspect the racks. Sponges, cloth scraps, reed brushes, barley straw pads. Everything has to be cleaned, reshaped, or replaced before the next rush tomorrow. You start by sorting the sponges soft medium. And what is this even made of? Then the cloths rinsed once, rinsed twice, and destined for the laundry pile. You work methodically, your fingers slick with vinegar and familiarity. And in this stillness you think. You think about how Roman bathrooms weren't just bathrooms. They were gathering spaces, status markers, engines of rumor, reconciliation, romance. You've watched lovers quarrel over sponge technique. You've seen senators muttering over scrolls while crouched like peasants. You've seen musicians offer impromptu concerts from the Eastern Wall because the acoustics were just too perfect to waste. Once you even witnessed a wedding proposal right here next to the rinse basin. She said yes. The sponge fell in the excitement. You gave them privacy by pretending to inspect the wall tiles for mold. And now, as the night settles over the city, you can almost hear the echoes of those moments, like laughter trapped in the grout. Outside, the streets are soft with silence. Occasionally a sandal scuffs the stone, or a fig seller trundles home with half a basket and a pocket full of dreams. You glance up and see the moon framed perfectly through the domed skylight. It glows silver across the basin water, making it shimmer like treasure. You lean over to skim the surface. Clean. Clear. Scented faintly of citrus thanks to a secret peel infusion you started adding last week. No one's noticed yet. But they will. You've started a trend before. Remember the dual pour rinse technique. That was you. You were the Beyoncé of bowel care, the Virgil of vinegar. You start scrubbing the east bench, the one near the wall scribbles. People carve things here. Messages, names, sketches. Today's new edition is a wobbly heart with Tiberia Poigeus. Poetic. You smile and decide not to erase it. Let love linger. Halfway through your cleaning, the torch carrier passes by the window, his light swinging rhythmically, painting stripes across the plaster like a sleepy tiger. You wave. He nods. No words. Just mutual recognition between two nocturnal souls in a city that never quite stops. You refill the rinse jars, carefully tilting the amphora to avoid splashing. Every drop counts. You're still haunted by that one day the vinegar shipment was short, and you had to dilute with lemon water. The complaints still echo in your ears. Once everything is scrubbed, restocked, and respectfully aligned, you gather the discarded mop rags and head to the wash trough outside. It's communal, fed by a small aqueduct branch, cool to the touch, even now. You plunge the cloths in, watching them darken, swirl, release their secrets. Beside you, a baker's apprentice is rinsing flour-dusted tunics. He nods without looking. Long day, you ask. He shrugs. Always is. Bread or sponges? What's worse? He thinks. Sponges don't burn your hands. You smile. Fair point. Back inside the mop, boy stirs. He rubs his eyes, confused. Did I miss the ghost again? You sigh. There's no ghost. He points at the western bench. Then who keeps moving the top sponge? You look. The sponge is slightly off-center. You didn't do that. Sleep, you say. Ghosts don't mess with vinegar. You aren't entirely convinced. You check the wall niches one last time. Someone's left a coin behind, wedged between a soap dish and a chipped pot. A thank you, an accident. Either way, it goes in the offering cup. You're superstitious like that. Before extinguishing the lamps, you sit on your stool and exhale. Not a glorious job, not one carved into marble, but essential. Historians still argue whether Rome's public sanitation was ahead of its time, or simply a necessity forced by crowding and empire. Some say the latrines were centers of social bonding. Others claim they were breeding grounds for infection and gossip. You suspect it's both. What you know for sure is this: people leave this space better than they entered it. Cleaner, calmer, slightly less burdened. And that means something. You light one final incense cone, cinnamon, and bay leaf, and place it near the rinse basin. Not for the smell, for the ritual. You like the way the smoke curls, like questions whispered to a god with no name. The mop boy finally stands. We done, you nod. Same time tomorrow, you nod again. He wanders out barefoot and humming. You follow, locking the door behind you with a practiced twist of the iron pin. The street is empty, the stones still warm. You walk slowly, your sandals tapping in rhythm with the cicadas. A cool breeze finds its way through the archway, brushing your cheek like a blessing. And behind you in that tiled sanctuary, the vinegar glows amber in the moonlight. Waiting for tomorrow. You're awake earlier than usual today. The city hasn't quite caught up its corners, still wrapped in pre-dawn haze, and the rooftops smudged with the last shadows of night. You walk quickly, your feet slapping damp cobbles slick from morning mist. The latrine's looming arch greets you like an old friend with a permanently raised eyebrow. Because today is inventory day. If that sounds glamorous, you've been tricked by the word inventory. What it really means is counting everything in the storeroom and the back alcove: vinegar levels, sponge bundles, clay cups, backup jugs, and most importantly, sponge sticks. Those notched wooden handles that, despite being a universal joke, are also the backbone of your business. You push the gate open. The air inside still holds last night's incense mingled with the earthy tang of vinegar. You breathe it in. To you, it's the scent of responsibility. Your apprentice is already there, bleary-eyed, balancing a small basket of reeds on his hip like it's an egg about to hatch. Guess how many sponge handles he yawns. Too few, you mutter, and you're probably right. You sit at the workbench with your wax tablet stylus ready. It's one of the few luxuries you afford yourself smooth beeswax that takes a clean mark, unlike the cheap, crumbly tablets the laundry keepers use. You draw a column for each item, and then the tallying begins. You count in 4s. You've tried 5s, but 4s match your shelf layout better. Sponge handles 13, vinegar amphorae 6 full 2 half empty, emergency lemon stash 5 1 shriveled into what might now be a weapon, cloth rags 37, but 7 are threadbare enough to qualify as tragic. A breeze stirs through the alcove and flips a linen rag into your face. You blink, startled, and mutter, "That better be clean." Inventory isn't just numbers. It's storytelling. Each item tells a tiny tale. That cracked vinegar jar dropped by a senator's servant in a rush. The missing handle used as firewood by a freezing night watchman who left a thank you note scratched into the plaster. Even the mop, the one with the crooked reed. It's been with you since your 2nd week. You've refused to replace it. It leans like it's listening. As the sun creeps higher, light slants through the skylight, casting golden diamonds across the bench. You take a moment. This isn't just bookkeeping, it's sacred geometry of a kind. Order amidst effluence. Halfway through sponge weighing, yes, you weigh them. Waterlogged sponges lie, you hear a commotion outside. Raised voices, feet slapping stone. A merchant barrels in, flanked by 2 guards and a terrified servant. "She stole a sponge," he roars. The woman, ragged but defiant, clutches something soaked and slimy to her chest. You sigh and put down your stylus. The guards look to you. You're the sponge authority, the lavatorial oracle. You motion them to stop shouting, then approach the accused. Her tunic is threadbare, but her eyes are sharp. "It was for my mother," she mutters. "Sick, can't walk." I thought no one would miss one. You look at the sponge. It's one of the good ones. Thicker weave. Still supple? You glance at your tablet. Inventory is precise but not merciless. You nod slowly. "It's fine," you say. "We'll make do." The merchant begins to protest, but you silence him with a look. Not angry, just firm. The guards back off. The woman offers the sponge back. You shake your head. "Just rinse it before use," you say. She nods and disappears into the street like smoke. Your apprentice stares. "You'll be short now." You shrug. Better a short sponge count than a long regret. He writes that down on his wax tablet like it's scripture. Later, as you recheck the soap dish inventory, 4 green, 3 gray, 1 suspiciously lavender, you reflect on the sponge thief. Babylon had scribes. Athens had orators. Rome has bathroom saints. Historians still argue whether Roman public facilities operated purely on civic funding or leaned heavily on private donation and informal patronage. Some scholars believe sponge theft was common and ignored. Others insist it was punished harshly, even violently. You've seen both. The truth floats somewhere between theft and compassion. And besides, you'll get another shipment next week if the vinegar cart doesn't topple again. Long story. 1 wheel. 2 goats. 1 terrified amphora. By the time you finish inventory, the sun is high, and the public has begun to trickle in, each visitor trailing their own cloud of dust perfume or philosophical intent. You stash your wax tablet under the bench and slip a small prayer coin into the wall niche. Not because you're deeply religious, but because anyone who manages inventory and still smiles by midday probably deserves divine insurance. The apprentice stands at the doorway, his sponge stick slung like a soldier's spear. All clear, he reports. You nod. And then in a move, rehearsed and sacred, you pour the first rinse of vinegar into the catch bowl, smell the steam rise, and announce with full ceremonial gravity, "We're open." There's something almost theatrical about the way a Roman bathhouse wakes up. The echoes build first bare feet, slapping tile polite coughs, the creak of a wooden ladle dipping into a basin. Then, layer by layer, the soundscape thickens, splashes, laughter, groans, the thrum of distant conversation. By midday, it'll crescendo into an amphitheater of noise. But this first hour is your favorite. You light the last of the incense cones near the latrine entrance, just enough to make the place smell like something vaguely dignified. Juniper and burned citrus peel, if you had to name it. The first regular of the day steps in. A portly fishmonger with fingers like salted sausages and sandals worn so thin they whisper. He always leaves the same way, singing a half-remembered lullaby to himself and patting your shoulder with a fishy hand. "Morning, Master Sponge," he says today. "Morning, Master Mackerel," you reply. You offer him his usual thin beer in a clay cup and a freshly rinsed sponge on a handle. He nods, thanks you, and disappears into his preferred stall, the one closest to the wall, because it feels less drafty. You've never told him they're all equally drafty. You sit on your stool and sip your own morning beer. Thin, frothy, and slightly sour. It's not fine enough for the palace, but it's cool, thanks to your trusty jar-in-sand setup. Not bad, considering your entire cooling system is essentially dirt cloth and prayer. Visitors arrive in waves. A pair of boys from the bakery across the street, still dusty with flour, argue over who gets the short stall. A matronly woman from the fabric district enters with a jug of vinegar and a basket of folded cloth, clearly her own setup, clearly judging yours. You nod respectfully. Bathroom politics are subtle. Then there's the poet. You don't know his name. No one does. But he recites verses from behind the stall wall like it's the Roman Forum. Today's entry. 2 olives sat where the chamber pot lay and pondered the stink of the emperor's day. You stop listening after that. Your apprentice rolls his eyes. Why do we let him in? Because he brings his own sponge, you reply. By mid-morning, the heat creeps in, not aggressively, more like a smug blanket wrapping the city one sunbeam at a time. You pour another cup of beer and dip your feet into the rinse basin. It's a luxury, but one you've earned. Then comes the inspector. He arrives unannounced as always, wearing the kind of tunic that wrinkles itself into authority. His sandals are polished, his stylus freshly sharpened. He walks in like someone inspecting a temple, not a latrine. You stand. Not because you respect him, he once fined you for improper sponge alignment, but because the fine was very real. He circles, he sniffs, he prods a vinegar jug with the end of his stylus. "Too warm," he murmurs. You point to your cooling jar setup. We've layered the linen, changed the sand, kept it damp. He nods grudgingly. "Any graffiti?" he asks. Your apprentice pipes up. "Only the drawing of the chicken in a toga." The inspector sighs. "That one again." He moves to the sponge rack. You hold your breath. Sponge condition is serious. Last year, a bathhouse across the river was shut down for mold. Mold, as if the entire empire weren't already half mildewed. He lifts one, sniffs it, frowns thoughtfully, then returns it. "I'll be back," he says, which is his way of saying, "You passed." You exhale. Historians still argue whether Rome's sanitation officials were truly invested in public health or merely state-appointed snoops. Some evidence suggests their reports were mostly for show. Others believe they played a genuine role in curbing disease, especially in crowded neighborhoods. Either way, you treat them like the vinegar essential sour and likely to sting. Your apprentice grins. "Told you the chicken graffiti wouldn't ruin us." You raise an eyebrow. Only because I added the laurel wreath. You pass the time by cleaning the sponge handles with olive oil and scrubbing the basins with a mix of ash and vinegar. It's not glamorous, but nothing creaks quite like a clean latrine bench, and your pride depends on acoustics. At one point, a senator's page enters with a scroll and a nose so high he almost sniffs the ceiling. He doesn't speak, just hands you the scroll. It's a request. From the senator himself. For a private stall. Daily. You frown. You're not in the business of privatizing something that belongs to the people, but you're also not in the business of being crushed by imperial taxes. You'll need to think about this one. Outside, a dog barks. Probably that mangy mutt who likes to nap under the shade of your vinegar jugs. You don't chase him off. He's part of the decor now. As the sun peaks, a lull falls over the bathhouse, the kind of silence that only comes when everyone's either done or dozing. You take a seat, rest your back, and breathe. Not bad, you think. You run a public restroom, but you do it with care, with tradition, with vinegar-soaked dignity. And somewhere in the back stall, the poet begins again. In marble halls of royal latrines, a sponge awaits serene and clean. You sigh. At least he's improving. The lull doesn't last long. A thump echoes through the hall, loud enough to make the walls flinch, and you know without looking that someone's dropped a jug. Probably one of the newer bathhouse boys, the one who always looks like he's thinking about bread instead of balance. You rise slowly, joints creaking like ancient hinges, and peek around the corner. A shattered amphora, the sharp scent of beer rising like a ghost from the puddle, and a boy with the unmistakable posture of "please don't yell at me. You just nod toward the mop." He scrambles. Accidents are part of the job. That's why you keep backup jars and backup sponges and backup excuses for senators who arrive when nothing is where it should be. The afternoon crowd begins to filter in. These are your thinkers, your lingerers, your second breakfast philosophers. They come not just for function, but for ritual. The same stalls, the same routines, the same complaints. You know them all by name and by sound. There's Galerius the cobbler, who insists on humming as he relieves himself a low, reedy drone like a sleepy lute. He tips you in sandals which are surprisingly useful. There's Vitula, the widow, who brings a lemon wedge to freshen the air. And there's Lucan, the retired soldier who always asks about your beer's body like he's describing a Gaulish ambush. They come because your latrine is known. Not famous, just dependable. Clean. Calm. The place where nothing terribly exciting happens, and that in a city like Rome is its own luxury. You lean against the stall divider and let the routine carry you. A woman enters holding a bundle of herbs. She tucks them under the bench before sitting an old superstition to ward off bad smells and worse spirits. You've seen it before. Fennel mostly, sometimes rosemary. One man once used dried fish. That day did not go well. Smells better than the Senate, she says, and you both laugh. You refill the vinegar jars, re-wet the cloths, and check the sand level in your jar coolers. It's tedious, sure, but it works, and it keeps you moving. There's a rhythm to the hours now. Scrub, pour, sweep, nod, repeat. The light slants lower, casting long, golden lines across the stone floor. You pause to sip from your bowl, still cool thanks to the careful layering and the shade from the overhang. You look over to see your apprentice trying to chisel a message into a scrap of clay. Probably something poetic. Probably misspelled. "What are you writing?" you ask. He grins. "A new business model." You squint. The tablet reads, "Private sponge service. Cleaner, faster, nicer smell." You chuckle. Add, "More discreet, and maybe you'll get senators." Historians still debate how entrepreneurial latrine workers were in ancient Rome. Some argue they functioned as low-ranking civil servants. Others point to inscriptions and graffiti that suggest fierce competition, personal branding, even secret beer recipes passed down like family heirlooms. Your own methods are a mix of borrowed tricks and stubborn trial and error. A merchant passes through nods once and leaves a date cake as thanks. You stash it in your pouch. Dinner, perhaps, or bargaining fodder with the sponge washer. Suddenly the door creaks, and you freeze. It's her, the Imperial Inspector's sister. She wears a shawl like it's a crown and walks like the floor owes her thanks. Last time she visited, she criticized your sponge handles, called them coarse. You'd spent 3 days sanding them to a silky polish after that. She doesn't speak just surveys. She selects a stall. You count your breaths. Moments later, she emerges, smooths her robes, and says nothing. That's good. Silence from her is a 5-star review. You exhale, you wipe your hands, you re-wrap a sponge, adjust the vinegar tray, and then it arrives. The scroll, delivered by a courier in a creased tunic and an expression like yesterday's soup. He hands it over without a word and leaves. You open it. It's from the senator. Again, he's doubled his offer for a private stall. Wants his own sponge, his own vinegar blend, even his own stool cushion. You sigh. The dilemma is familiar. The perks would be considerable extra barley, perhaps a new mop. But you'd need to clear space, shift regulars, offend the widow, no doubt. And Lucan would throw a fit. He once got in a shouting match over sponge rotation and nearly threw his sandals. You place the scroll in your apron and fold it tight. Not yet. Not today. Outside the shadows deepen. Inside the pace slows. Someone hums a lullaby. The poet, probably. This time it's about pigeons and passion fruit. It's oddly good. You take a seat on your low stool, stretch your back, and close your eyes for a breath. This is the quiet hour. The golden lull before the final rush. You enjoy it. Because no matter how many scrolls arrive, how many amphorae tip, how many senators demand silk-covered stools, the core of your work remains the same. A clean place to go. A warm bowl of beer. And the fleeting illusion that here at least the world makes sense. The lull doesn't last. You've barely exhaled when the next wave hits, less a crowd, more a sudden uprising of tired feet and full bladders. The theater down the road must have just let out. You hear it before you see it, a flurry of sandals on stone, laughter echoing in waves, and someone belting out a terrible rendition of a love song about figs. They swarm in all noise and drama, like wine had been half the performance. You brace yourself. The regulars glance up from their posts and sigh in unison. This is not their scene. These are the loud ones, the ones who ask too many questions, the ones who mistake a public latrine for a comedy stage and you for a stagehand. Where's the golden sponge? One of them yells, slapping a friend on the back. There isn't one, you mutter. But there should be, he crows. And just like that, he's off performing an improvised routine involving imperial bottoms and nectar-soaked toilet wine. You've heard worse. But not today. Still, the show must go on. You direct them to stalls, offer vinegar-soaked cloths, and rescue one poor girl who seems to think the sponge stick is a walking cane. It's not. Please stop waving it around. A nearby senator's assistant looks horrified. You shrug. It's either this or let them try the alley behind the bakery. He nods grimly. The bakery's still recovering from last week. As the chaos hums along, you slip into the back for a moment of sanity. You refill the vinegar jug, re-wet the cloths, and check your stash of barley cakes. One left. You break it in half and tuck the larger piece aside for your apprentice. You notice something odd. A small clay plaque left tucked under your basin. It's etched with a stylized sponge and a pair of wings. Beneath it, a message. To the guardian of clean behinds. You saved me twice. I repay you with art. You blink. A gift from whom you scan the room. No obvious suspects. Just Galerius, humming Lucan asleep mid-lean, and the performer reenacting a tragic romance between a chamber pot and a fig vendor. You smile anyway. Historians still argue whether ancient Rome allowed gifts to public workers. Some claim it blurred the line with bribery. Others believe it was part of the unofficial thank you economy. Either way, you're keeping the plaque. Maybe hang it above your vinegar station. The sun outside has faded into something softer. Torches are being lit. The flicker is beautiful even in a latrine, especially in a latrine. There's a rhythm to things again. A gentler one. The rowdy crowd thins. A girl returns to fetch her sandal left behind, she says during a moment of excitement. You don't ask. You check the cooling jars. Still damp, still cool, still working. You dab your forehead and glance toward the front. Your apprentice is talking to a boy his age. The boy looks nervous, like this is his first real trip away from his family's courtyard latrine. You overhear bits of the conversation. Yes, it's safe. No, it doesn't bite. Try not to drop anything. He's learning. You take your place again. The bench feels worn but familiar. Like the beer in your bowl, slightly too warm, slightly too thick, but yours. Suddenly, a shout. Someone spotted a rat. You stand mop in hand, ready for battle. But it scurries away before you get there. Smart thing knows not to pick a fight with a sponge wielder after dark. The commotion fades and someone mutters, "That rat looked like it paid taxes." You stifle a laugh. Later, a young woman enters with her elderly mother. They move slowly. You rise to help. The daughter thanks you, the mother blesses you. You guide her gently, offer a clean cloth, and make sure no one rushes them. It's quiet now. It feels right. After they leave, you glance around. A man is sleeping in the far corner, propped against a wall, snoring lightly. Another is scribbling on a clay shard. Possibly poetry, possibly a grocery list. The amphora near the door gurgles gently. It's cracked a bit near the lip, but still holds. You'll need to patch that tomorrow. You exhale again. This place, it's not glamorous, but it works. You've kept it running. Through the rushes, the noise, the performances, the accidents, through cracked jars and gifted plaques and bizarre fig poetry. And you'll keep it running tomorrow. Because this is more than a place to relieve oneself. It's a system, a sanctuary, a slice of society tucked into stone. And at the center of it, standing with sponge and vinegar, and the quiet pride of a job done well, is you. You begin to recognize the rhythms now. Not just the foot traffic or the snorts of sleeping patrons, but the deeper patterns, how the day hums and folds itself around this place, how people enter differently than they leave. Lighter, emptier, sometimes cleaner, occasionally more confused. It's subtle, but it's real. And as the evening deepens, a new visitor approaches. She's old, truly old. Her face is all folds and wisdom, her tunic sun-bleached to the color of faded papyrus. She carries a clay jug slung in a basket and walks with a stick capped by a brass goat's head. She doesn't speak right away, just nods as you step aside and guide her toward the larger stall near the mosaic wall, the one you always save for those who've earned a little reverence. She leaves the jug outside. You pick it up curious, it's light, faintly warm, and smells of licorice and boiled fennel. You resist the urge to peek inside. When she emerges, she does speak. "You run a clean house," she says. You bow slightly. "I try." She smiles, and her teeth are surprisingly intact. Clean is good, but calm is better. And with that bit of Zen latrine wisdom, she takes her jug and vanishes into the torchlit street, trailing fennel-scented mystery in her wake. You're still thinking about her when the door creaks and two men enter arguing in whispers. One's clutching his stomach. The other is carrying a jar of something that's definitely not standard latrine fare. You squint. Pickled eggs, is this a delivery? You ask cautiously. The one holding the jar shushes you. We're experimenting. You pause. In a latrine, they nod, solemn. It's where inspiration strikes, says the one with the eggs. You hand them the key to the back stall. Try not to explode anything. Historians still argue whether Romans practiced fermentation science inside bathhouses and public latrines. There's very little consensus, possibly because no one wants to admit they ate anything that began its journey near a communal sponge bucket. The two men vanish with their pickled mystery. You light another oil lamp. The flame flickers and steadies. The heat from the day is finally leaving the walls. A gentle breeze weaves through the vents. The vinegar has mellowed. Your own scent now seems part of the room's soul, earthy, sour, and maybe just a touch philosophical. A group of workers enters next bricklayers from the looks of it. Their hands are raw, their tunics streaked with mortar. One of them has a bandaged toe, the wrapping already loosening. You crouch to rewrap it, making a joke about it being worth at least half a beer ration. He laughs. Not unless I lose the whole foot. You chuckle with him, then hand him a small cloth soaked in rosewater. Just for the scent. A small grace. He nods in thanks and makes his way to the line. You settle back on your bench. Lucan stirs in his sleep and mutters something about donkeys and missing sandals. You gently nudge his mop back into place and let him rest. And then it happens. A scream, not a dramatic scream. A small one. Frantic. From behind the mosaic wall. You jump up, grab your broom, your default weapon, and race toward the sound. It's the egg experimenters. One is standing eyes wide, holding a shattered pot. The other is on the floor, covered in yellow goop and muttering, "Too much cumin." Too much. You survey the scene. Broken jar. Pungent residue. No visible injuries. You sigh. Was this necessary? They both nod. You help them clean up. The smell lingers, tangy, spicy, not entirely unpleasant. It might even be an improvement. Back at your station, the air has shifted. Someone is playing a flute just outside. The notes drift in slow and meandering. You don't recognize the melody, but it fits. A lullaby for the lavatory. You return to your seat and notice something new. A small bag of dried dates has been left near your vinegar jug. No note, no signature, just quiet gratitude wrapped in cloth. You pocket it. Might share with Lucan, might not. You lean back. The latrine, despite everything, is calm again. Not empty, never empty, but balanced. Like it's exhaled. Like it knows its job and does it well. You think about everything this room has seen. The rushes, the rituals, the ridiculous theories, the friendships, the tears, the experiments gone slightly too far. And you wonder how many centuries from now someone will find the remnants of this place and try to piece it together. Historians still argue how much of Roman daily life survived in whispers, how much was erased, how much was simply misunderstood. You hope someone remembers the vinegar. The oil lamp dims. You light a fresh one. Its glow wraps around you like a cloak. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays. The flute continues, and Lucan snores on, unbothered by egg bandage or bureaucracy. You, however, remain. The watchful eye, the quiet caretaker, the one who knows how to keep a room full of strangers feeling, if not exactly clean, at least respected. The latrine doesn't sparkle, but it shines. The oil lamp flickers again, but this time you let it. You've begun to enjoy the darkening corners, the way the soft shadows blur the edges of amphorae and basin rims, how the glow leaves just enough mystery to keep things gentle. After the chaos of egg scientists and screaming pottery, a lull feels earned. Lucan finally wakes. He stretches, rubs his face, and looks around with the dazed confusion of someone unsure whether it's dawn or the afterlife. You hand him a fig. He blinks at it, eats it without question, so he mumbles, "Anything explode." You nod solemnly. A culinary revolution. We may be remembered for centuries. He grunts. Hope they spell my name right. There's an ease between you two now. A rhythm. He's not a great assistant, he forgets the vinegar half the time, and once tried to scrub the marble with bread, but he's here. And in a room that churns through hundreds of backsides, daily presence counts. You send him to replace the water basins. He groans, then goes. Another wave begins. Evening regulars, the ones who drink late and regret quickly, the ones who come humming temple hymns, muttering about lost bets or dragging their sandals like every step offends the ground. One woman enters wearing what might have once been a senator's tunic, now dyed with wine and rumor. She bows theatrically and asks if the throne is ready. You gesture grandly to the cleanest stall. She grins. Long may I reign. Another man, stooped, bearded, whispering to himself, walks to the sponge bucket and blesses it with a sprig of rosemary. You don't ask why. You've seen stranger rituals, including the man who insisted on facing east every time he went. Historians still argue whether personal bathroom customs in Rome were rooted in superstition hygiene or simply boredom. Likely, it was all three. Lucan returns, soaked from knees down, complaining about the fountain being hogged by a gang of street performers, using it as a foot bath. You toss him a dry cloth and try not to imagine toe dirt soup. Still, the water smells clean. He's done well. You settle back in only to spot someone you haven't seen in weeks, Marcus, a former grain weigher with eyebrows that resemble two angry hedgehogs. He limps in, winces dramatically, and clutches his lower back. "You all right, you ask?" He nods. Too much lifting. Not enough drinking. You help him to the bench. He sits with a thud. You know, he says, if Rome paid us in beer instead of coins, half our backs would still work. He's not wrong. In fact, some records show that in specific guilds, especially among masons and dock workers, beer or diluted wine was offered at intervals to keep morale and muscles from mutiny. Hydration was practical. Alcohol was coping. Marcus waves toward the vinegar bucket. Still the same. You smile. Still the same. He nods like that's the only certainty worth having. You take a moment to walk the perimeter. Everything's as it should be. Torches low but steady. Water jars full, buckets in place, sponges replaced. A faint breeze trickles in from the alley vents. The room smells of clay soap bark and a little rosemary now. You stand in the doorway looking out toward the alleyway where night markets are winding down. A boy runs past laughing, chased by a girl waving a leek. You wonder what that fight was about. Love, probably. Or soup. Inside, Lucan yawns loud enough to wake the tiles. You toss him a walnut. It bounces off his forehead. He eats it anyway. And then, with the casual tragedy of fate, the door opens again, and 5 men shuffle in. Soldiers. Dusty, sunburned, clearly fresh from a long march. One drops a sandal, glares at it like betrayal. Another asks, "Is this the latrine that sings, 'You blink'?" Not lately. He shrugs. Worth a try. They smell of sweat sand and the long road back from wherever they've been. You nod toward the stalls. They groan in grateful chorus. One of them, younger cleaner, leans over your table and taps the vinegar jug. Still using the bay leaf trick? You raise an eyebrow. You know the bay leaf trick. He grins. My uncle ran a latrine in Syracuse. Said it kept the smell sweet and the flies nervous. You like him instantly. Historians still argue whether bay leaves genuinely repelled pests or were just another ancient placebo layered onto every possible household surface. But the scent is nice, and it does make the flies seem cautious. You watch the soldiers cycle through the routine, relieving, rinsing, redressing with slow precision. They move like men who've carried more than just their gear, men who've held secrets, losses, songs that don't end happily. Before leaving, one places a small silver ring on the bench. For the smell, he says. You want to refuse. You also know better. You nod. He nods back. Outside, the stars have doubled. Or maybe your eyes are finally adjusting to the dark. Lucan snores again, an unrepentant wheeze that might summon rats or saints depending on who hears it. You lean your head against the cool clay of the wall. Let your eyelids fall halfway. You won't sleep. But you'll rest. The latrine is still. For now. You don't dream exactly, but you do float. Not on water, though the trickle of the hand-washing basins might have fooled you, but on the rhythm of this place, the steady shuffling of sandals, the quiet clinks of jars, the soft scrape of wood against stone as someone adjusts a stool. It's a lullaby written in cleaning supplies and steam. Lucan startles awake with a snort. You crack one eye open. He's blinking at a spider crossing his boot like it pays rent. He lets it pass. The torch near the door burns low now, its light soft and buttery. That golden hour of night when the streets are emptier, voices quieter, and even the most insistent bowels seem to hold their breath. This is when the odd ones arrive. A scholar enters hunched and dusty, holding a wax tablet. He gestures toward the stalls like he's asking permission to quote a philosopher. You wave him in. He returns minutes later, beaming. Best thinking happens near water, he says, scratching a line onto his tablet. You nod. History agrees with you. And it does. Roman bathhouses and latrines were hubs of conversation, debate, and absurd inspiration. Some of the oldest fragments of political graffiti were found scratched into bathroom walls. Entire policy criticisms, marriage proposals, and rude poems composed beside the sponge bucket. He lingers by the vinegar jug. Any chance you've got mint leaves in there, you shake your head. Try the palace. He laughs and vanishes into the night. Lucan, ever curious when he's barely awake, asks if that was Plato. You assure him it was not. He seems disappointed. The next visitor is a woman noble by the look of her jewelry, and the slight disdain she wears like a second toga. Her sandals are too clean for the street, which means she came in a litter. You brace for a complaint. Instead, she places a small ceramic dish on your table. Inside, a folded square of perfumed cloth. For your nose, she says simply. You look like you could use a good smell. And just like that, she's gone. Probably to a banquet. Probably where people will discuss the noble humility of gifting scented linen to common workers. But you don't care. You hold it up and breathe deep. Lavender. Maybe rosemary. Maybe something rarer. Spikenard historians still argue whether elite Romans used rare imported scents daily or only for rituals and ceremonies. The trade records suggest yes. The economy suggests very expensive yes. You tuck it away carefully, a small token against the future. And then, of course, your least favorite group arrives. 3 drunk youths barely of voting age, dressed in togae virils and armed with terrible poetry and overconfidence. They barrel in like gladiators charging the arena, laughing too loudly, making jokes about temple-sized movements and divine flushes. Lucan groans. You hand him the good sponge. One of them tries to balance a cup on the sponge stick. Another attempts to recite a line of Virgil, fails, and declares, "Who needs Latin when you have guts?" You're about to intervene when a 4th figure enters. An older man. Same family nose. Same mouth, just wiser. Their father, maybe uncle. The boys freeze. One drops his wine cup. Go, home, the man says. They vanish. You mouth a silent thank you. He nods, glancing around the room like he's checking for damage. Then, without a word, he uses the facilities, washes his hands, and leaves a small coin near the vinegar. Discipline and dignity in and out. You and Lucan sit for a moment in silence. "Remind me not to have children," Lucan mutters. "Too late, you say." He gasps. "Really?" You smirk. "No, but the fear will keep you cautious." The torch dies. You replace it with a fresh one from the clay jar by the door. The flicker brightens the room again, casting new shadows behind the sponge racks and water basins. It feels almost like morning, but not quite. That hour of illusion. And just as you're adjusting the flame, a messenger rushes in, sweating, panting, and clearly desperate. "Where's the cleaner?" he gasps. You raise a hand. He points to your wall. I need the inscription, the one about vinegar. My master wants to quote it at dinner." You blink. "You mean the graffiti?" He nods earnestly. "The one that says, 'Wine for kings, vinegar for real men.'" He loved it. You shrug, then gesture towards the wall. He scribbles it onto a scroll and bolts back into the night. The message, apparently, is part of a toast. So now your bathroom wall is a quotable source. Lucan chuckles. "We should start charging for phrases. Put it on the rate board." And yet you're not joking. You've watched this room, this stinking, scraped, scrubbed chamber of echoes, turn into something strange and sacred. Not because it's clean, though it is, or quiet, though rarely, but because it listens, absorbs, waits. It's neutral ground in a city of battles, a space where masks come off, layers drop, and people pause, even if just for a breath, even if they forget to flush. The hours creep on, and in them you see what the historians miss, the moments too small to carve in stone, too mundane for epic poems. The way a man hums while rinsing his hands. The way a woman adjusts her sandals before squatting like preparing for ceremony. The way Lucan snores through philosophy. It's not heroic, but it's real, and for tonight, real is enough. You are drowsy now. Not from the hour necessarily, but from the rhythm of it all. The looping rituals, the soft splash of water, the scent of vinegar now so familiar it barely registers. You've moved through the day like a shadow following heat, and now here in the night you begin to feel less like a person and more like a part of the room. Lucan, half asleep on the edge of a bench, mumbles something about bread, or maybe bed, hard to tell. His head nods, then jolts, then nods again. You toss a folded cloth over his shoulders and leave him be. The torch is down to its last inch. You let it burn. From outside, the night wind carries the muffled clink of amphorae and distant mule bells. Babylon may be full of smoke and spice, but Rome at night is cool bread and leather straps. It is practical, quietly efficient. It gets tired like everyone else. There's a lull now and you seize it. You take a damp cloth and begin wiping the bench nearest the latrine. Not because it's dirty, but because it feels good to move slowly to polish away the day. You hum without meaning to. A tune you learned from your mother who used to clean the floors, humming just like this. You never understood it back then. Now you do. Halfway through your humming, a soft knock echoes at the outer gate. You look at Lucan, still snoring. So it's you. You lift the latch and swing open the door. Outside, standing in the torchlight, is a man in senator's robes. At this hour, his sandals are clean, which means he rode here, not walked. His brow is drawn. Serious, but not angry. You nod silently and step aside. He enters like someone entering a tomb, slow, reverent, a bit ashamed. You know that look. He approaches the first stall, pauses, then turns. Do you mind waiting? You blink. Of course not. He nods. I don't like being overheard. You retreat to the outer chamber and sit down quietly. This is not rare. High-ranking Romans often visited in the late hours, not because they needed privacy for their bodies, but for their minds. The stalls became confessionals, the rinse basins altars, the steam and echo absolution. Historians still argue whether Roman toilets were more social spaces or sites of individual reflection. The truth is they were both. Depends on the hour, depends on the burden. When the senator finishes, he emerges with his face a little looser, his voice a little lighter. "Thank you," he says, placing a small coin near the vinegar. But then he hesitates. "Tell me," he asks, "do you believe in omens?" You cock your head. He gestures at the wall toward a worn inscription someone once scrawled between washings. It reads, "The gods visit often. They just rarely announce themselves." "I see that here sometimes," he says. "And I wonder, was it written in jest or hope you pause before answering?" "Maybe both," you say. He chuckles. "Good answer." And then he's gone. You stand a moment longer staring at the phrase. You don't remember who etched it. Could have been years ago. Could have been last week. Graffiti lives longer than memory in this place. You check the rinse buckets, still full. You check the sponge rack, still in order. You listen, nothing. Just silence and torch crackle and Lucan's uneven breathing. You begin wiping the second bench. A cockroach scurries by undeterred. You let it pass. You're too tired to wage war tonight. And yet there's something about this hour. The deep night. The half-dead quiet. It softens things. Rounds the edges of the clay. Mutes the vinegar. Makes you forget how many times you've said "rinse again, please," or handed a sponge without looking up. You finish wiping. Sit down. Breathe. Lucan stirs, mumbles, and without opening his eyes says, "Did I dream that a senator came in?" Yes. Did I dream he tipped well? No. Good. He drifts again. You gaze up at the ceiling. Just rough brick and soot stains. But you swear just for a second you see stars through the cracks. You blink. Gone. You've worked a long day. Maybe that's all it is. Or maybe the gods do visit, and maybe tonight they bring nothing but sleep. There's a slowness now. Not fatigue exactly, more like surrender. You've moved through this day the way a river moves through reeds with friction and purpose, and the occasional unexpected detour. But now in these final moments you simply drift. Lucan snores softly again. The torch guttered out 20 minutes ago, but you haven't bothered to relight it. There's a single oil lamp still glowing in the far corner. Its flame dances against the basin like a small spirit, casting sleepy shadows that flicker and collapse like tired knees. You rise and stretch your arms above your head. Your tunic rustles like a curtain in a breeze. It's damp under the arms, dusty along the hem, and smells faintly of vinegar barley water, and whatever that senator's perfume was. You think it involved roses, or wet cedar, or maybe just money. You peer into the rinse trough and notice a stray petal drifting in the water. Definitely roses. Your stomach growls a late reminder that you never finished that flatbread from earlier. It's probably gone stiff now, curled like an old parchment scroll, but still edible if you're not picky. You'll get to it. Or not. Depends how long this mood lasts. You sit, exhale, and allow the full weight of silence to drape over you. There is something rare here, something fragile. Not just peace, not just exhaustion, but the sacred kind of quiet you can only earn through service repetition attention. The kind of quiet that smells like clay and old wood and water long at rest. You think about the dozens of people who passed through this place today. The anxious ones, the boisterous ones, the regulars, the embarrassed first-timers, the wealthy and perfumed, the barefoot brick haulers, the drunk, the devout. All of them sat, all of them rinsed, and all of them for a fleeting moment became exactly the same. Historians still argue whether Roman latrines were tools of social leveling or merely grim necessities masked in marble, whether they reinforced hierarchy or dissolved it temporarily, whether the shared sponge was a metaphor or just a sponge. But you've seen it from the other side. You know the truth lies in the details, in the way someone pauses before sitting down, in the way their shoulders slump after they're done, in the soft thank you murmured while tying a sandal. The latrine isn't a symbol, it's a process. And like all good processes, it changes people even if only slightly, even if only for a moment. You run your fingers along the grain of the bench. There are gouges here, cuts from bored hands with knives or anxious ones with nails. One is shaped like a fish, another, a star. You think someone scratched a name once Titus, then crossed it out with something sharper. You wonder who Titus was. Maybe just another attendant. Maybe someone who asked too many questions. You smile. Lucan shifts again, letting out a noise halfway between a groan and a prayer. His hand searches for his water cup, finds only a rag, and gives up. He's been doing this job for longer than you. He'll probably die on this bench one day. And strangely, he seems fine with that. You get up, walk to the corner, and check the drain. Still flowing, still gurgling gently like a sleeping throat. You listen for a while as if the drain has something to say. It doesn't. But the sound is comforting. You tidy the last few buckets, adjust the sponge rack, turn the empty amphorae so the mouths face downward. Then you wipe your hands on your tunic and return to your bench. The sky outside is softening. Not bright yet, but less black. A smudge of pearl on the horizon. Morning is stretching behind the rooftops, yawning her golden jaws. And suddenly, it's tomorrow. You take one final sip of water, swirling the cup to catch the last cool drop. It tastes of ash and clay and mint leaves from earlier. Somehow it's perfect. You place the cup beside you. Fold your hands and breathe. Your eyes are heavier now. Not from strain, but from release. You've spent the night walking a day in someone else's sandals, soft-soled, worn thin but steady. You've rinsed, folded, carried, waited. You've watched the city of Rome breathe through its bricks and benches and murmured requests for soap. And now, with the first kiss of dawn on the window's edge, you're ready to rest. Let this story linger behind your eyes like a warm glow. Let the hiss of amphorae lids, the gentle rhythm of rinse buckets, and the echo of tired footsteps soothe your thoughts. You've seen the empire from its lowest seat, where dignity isn't declared by togas or rings, but by quiet patience and small kindnesses, and the honesty of cleaning something no one else wants to. The city is waking now, but you don't have to. You're not needed on the sponge line. Not tonight. Tonight you've earned something simpler. A breath. A stillness. The feeling that history doesn't always have to be thundering battles and famous names. Sometimes it's a clean bench, a tired laugh, a bowl of water shared without question. So let your limbs go soft. Let your thoughts drift like steam from a rinse pit. You've traveled far enough. And when you wake, whenever you do, Rome will still be here. And maybe someone will have warmed your seat. Good night.